Let's begin with a quiet question. A question that has echoed through history and troubled the hearts of thinkers, rulers, and revolutionaries alike. Why do the weak often resent the strong? Why is it that strength, real, authentic strength, so often invites suspicion, hatred, or even violence? To explore this, we must walk into the mind of one of the most provocative and misunderstood philosophers in history, Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche did not write for the faint of heart. His words are sharp, his thoughts are bold, but beneath the intensity lies a deep concern for the human soul and for its potential to grow or to decay. He believed that people fall into two broad categories: those who embrace life, take risks, assert themselves, and create, and those who withdraw, blame others, avoid responsibility, and resent power. He called these two types the master morality and the slave morality. Let's take a moment to unpack what that means. Master morality, in Nietzsche's view, comes from strength. It's the mindset of someone who says, "I am strong, therefore strength is good. I am brave, therefore courage is good. I am generous, therefore generosity is good." It is a morality that begins from within, from the affirmation of life and of one's own power. The master type creates values based on what enhances life, what affirms vitality, creativity, and independence. Now contrast this with slave morality. This arises from weakness, not from affirmation, but from reaction. The person who cannot fight back creates a morality that turns their weakness into a kind of moral superiority. They say, "I am oppressed, therefore suffering is good. I am powerless, therefore humility is good. I am obedient, therefore obedience is good." This morality does not celebrate life. It denies and distorts it. Nietzsche believed that slave morality comes from a deep place of resentment. The weak look at the strong and feel envy. But they cannot express this envy openly. They cannot admit their desire for strength because it would mean confronting their own inadequacy. So instead, they redefine the meaning of strength. They call it evil. They call it arrogance. They call it cruelty. And by doing so, they convince themselves that their own weakness is actually virtue. This process is what Nietzsche called ressentiment, not just resentment, but a deep, poisonous form of it. It is when the powerless person cannot act, cannot change their condition, and so turns their anger inward. But instead of confronting it, they create moral systems that flip the value structure of life upside down. They demonize the qualities they lack. They hate the strong, not because the strong are bad, but because they remind them of their own failure to rise. Now let's pause here. It's important to understand that Nietzsche was not promoting cruelty. He was not saying that the strong should dominate others. That's a misreading. What he was saying is much more subtle. He was pointing out how morality itself can become a weapon. Not a weapon of justice, but a weapon of revenge. A way for the weak to gain power over the strong by redefining what is good and what is evil. Let's look at an example. Imagine someone who has never taken risks, who has never pushed themselves. They live in fear. They avoid confrontation. And then they see someone bold, someone who dares to dream, who takes action, who speaks truth even when it's uncomfortable. That person becomes a threat. Not because they've done anything wrong, but because they reveal what the weak person is not willing to be. Instead of admiring them, the weak person begins to whisper. "They're arrogant," they say. "They only care about themselves. They think they're better than everyone else." And slowly, the group begins to agree. They start praising passivity as kindness, indecision as humility, submission as wisdom. Strength becomes something dangerous, something shameful. And so the tall are asked to stoop so that the small can feel tall. Nietzsche saw this happening on a cultural scale. He believed that much of modern morality, especially in the West, had been shaped by this slave mindset. The strong were told to feel guilty. The powerful were taught to apologize for their power. Ambition was condemned. Individuality was mistrusted. Excellence was made suspicious. All in the name of equality, but really in the name of envy. Let's go deeper into Nietzsche's solution. He didn't believe that the answer was to dominate others. Instead, he believed in transcending the battle entirely. He introduced the concept of the Übermensch, or the overman. This is not a tyrant, not a ruler, but a person who rises above the herd, not with violence, but with inner strength. Someone who creates their own values, who lives from a place of self-overcoming. The overman is not concerned with being loved or hated. He is concerned with being true to himself. This is where Nietzsche's message becomes empowering. If you are strong, if you have vision, courage, clarity, you must not let the weak convince you that your strength is wrong. You must not let guilt shrink your soul. Instead, you must become even more yourself. But with discipline, with depth, with compassion. Not the compassion that seeks approval, but the compassion that says, I will not diminish myself to make you comfortable. I will rise, and in doing so, I will show others what rising looks like. It's not about domination, it's about demonstration. You do not need to explain yourself to those who hate your strength. Their hatred says more about them than it does about you. What they truly hate is the mirror you hold up, the reflection of their own unrealized potential. And instead of facing that pain, they attack the mirror. Nietzsche's warning is clear. Do not fall into the trap of resentment. Whether you are strong or weak, watch your heart. Ask yourself, am I celebrating life, or am I attacking those who do? Am I creating values from within, or am I reacting against what I fear? These questions are not easy, but they are essential. The road Nietzsche points to is not safe. It is not popular. It requires solitude, reflection, brutal honesty. It requires you to stop blaming others, stop playing the victim, and start asking, what am I capable of? What truth am I afraid to face? What greatness have I abandoned out of fear? And here lies the core of Nietzsche's philosophy. Not hatred, not hierarchy, but transformation. He believed that life is a challenge, a test of the will. And those who rise are not always rewarded. In fact, they are often attacked. But they must rise anyway, not for fame, not for approval, but because the alternative is decay. As we bring this first part to a close, remember this. The hatred of the strong by the weak is not about justice, it is about fear. And the cure is not revenge, it is responsibility. Take responsibility for your life, for your mind, for your strength, and do not hide it. The world needs it, even if it resents it. In part 2, we will go deeper into the psychology of resentment. We will explore how it shows up in modern life, in media, in relationships, in culture. And we'll begin to uncover how you can rise above it, not by fighting the weak, but by strengthening your own soul. Until then, reflect gently. Walk slowly and ask yourself, am I building or am I blaming? The answer will show you where your strength truly lies. In the first part of our journey, we explored the difference between master morality and slave morality. We looked into the heart of resentment. We saw how the weak often develop a worldview that condemns strength, not because strength is wrong, but because it reveals what they have not yet become. Now let's take this insight deeper. Let's examine how this psychology of resentment shows up in the world around us, quietly, subtly, and often without anyone even realizing it. You don't need to look far to see the patterns Nietzsche described. They are in our movies, in our social media feeds, in our workplaces, in our schools. They appear in the way we speak about success, ambition, wealth, beauty, intelligence. When someone rises above the crowd, people don't just watch, they judge. And the judgments often come in the form of subtle criticisms. She's too full of herself. He got lucky. They think they're better than everyone else. These aren't just comments, they are symptoms. They come from a deep discomfort with excellence. They come from the fear of being left behind. And instead of being inspired, many people choose to diminish the one who rises. They try to pull them down, not with fists but with words, not with logic but with insinuation. This is how resentment hides. Resentment doesn't always look like hatred. Sometimes it looks like moral concern. Sometimes it looks like fairness. But underneath there is something else. A refusal to confront one's own failure. A deep desire to drag others down so we don't have to rise up. Nietzsche believed that this is one of the greatest dangers to culture, the slow erosion of excellence by the mediocrity of the crowd. Let's pause here and be honest. Every one of us at some point has felt envy. It is human, it is natural. But the question is not whether envy arises. The question is what we do with it. Do we use it as fuel to push ourselves forward, to grow, to improve? Or do we use it as poison to criticize, to attack, to resent? There is a crucial moment in the human heart when this choice appears. A friend achieves something remarkable. A stranger lives boldly. A leader speaks truth without fear. And in that moment, something stirs inside us. That stirring can become admiration, or it can become bitterness. Nietzsche's wisdom is this: if you do not confront your envy, it will shape your soul in secret. Let's now talk about modern culture. Nietzsche warned that societies built on resentment become sick. They lose the will to create. They lose the courage to speak truth. They begin to reward safety instead of strength, conformity instead of creativity. In such a society, the strong are asked to apologize. The gifted are taught to hide their gifts. And the people begin to believe that comfort is the highest good. But Nietzsche did not believe in comfort. He believed in struggle. Not meaningless suffering, but the kind of struggle that makes you become more. He believed that every great soul must pass through a period of solitude, of difficulty, of confrontation with the self. And this is why he feared a culture of resentment, because it shields people from the very pain that leads to growth. Let's take an example from real life. Imagine a student who is always praised just for showing up. They are never challenged, never asked to push harder. They begin to believe that effort doesn't matter, that mediocrity is enough. And then one day they meet someone different, someone who has worked hard, developed skill, taken risks. This other person shines. But instead of being inspired, the student feels embarrassed. And rather than growing, they lash out. You think you're better than me. And the culture around them agrees this is not compassion, this is corruption. Nietzsche called this the revaluation of values, a quiet revolution where the definitions of good and evil are flipped, where success becomes suspicious, where humility is no longer a virtue of the strong but a cover for the weak, where we stop asking, "Is this true?" and start asking, "Does this make me feel comfortable?" Nietzsche would say, "Beware," because when we redefine truth to protect our feelings, we lose both truth and strength. And when resentment becomes the foundation of morality, we do not lift the weak, we weaken the strong, we do not heal the soul, we numb it. Let's bring this down to a personal level. If you've ever felt strong and been made to feel ashamed of it, remember you are not wrong for being strong. You are not wrong for rising. You are not wrong for shining. What matters is not how others feel about your strength. What matters is how you use it. Do you use it to lift others, to speak truth, to create? Or do you hide it, afraid of being judged? And if you've ever felt the sting of envy, don't deny it. Face it. Ask yourself, what is it in this other person that bothers me? And could it be that they are showing me something I have not yet claimed in myself? Nietzsche believed that the path to greatness begins with radical honesty. The willingness to say, I am not who I could be, but I will not stay this way. I will rise. I will confront my envy. I will take responsibility for my life. That is not easy. That is not safe. But it is powerful. There is something sacred in that decision. The decision to stop blaming others, to stop tearing people down, to stop hiding, and instead to build, to strive, to become. That is what Nietzsche admired, not dominance but self-overcoming, not arrogance but authenticity, not cruelty but courage. And here is the great paradox. The people who are truly strong, who are deeply grounded, inwardly whole, are often the least interested in proving it. They do not need to shout. They do not need to control others. Their power is quiet, steady, real. And they use it not to make others feel small, but to make the world more true. But those who have not faced themselves, those who are still ruled by fear, by shame, by weakness, often cannot tell the difference. They mistake confidence for arrogance. They mistake boundaries for hostility. They mistake truth for judgment. And so they lash out, not because they are bad, but because they are still asleep. Nietzsche's invitation is this: wake up, look at your heart, look at your life. Where are you hiding? Where are you shrinking? Where are you attacking others instead of confronting yourself? That is where your work begins. Not in changing others, but in changing yourself. And when you do that, when you begin to transform, you will no longer fear the strong, because you will become one of them. Not in domination, but in presence. Not in violence, but in vision. You will walk into a room and people will feel it, not because you are loud, but because you are clear. Not because you control others, but because you control yourself. That is what true strength looks like. And that is what resentment cannot understand. As we move into part 3, we will talk about how to develop this kind of strength. We'll explore how to build an inner life that cannot be shaken by the opinions of others. How to cultivate virtues that rise above the herd, and how to live a life that honors your deepest potential. Until then, be slow to judge, be quick to reflect, and remember, resentment is a mirror. And if you are willing to look into it with courage, it will show you who you were meant to become. Now that we've understood the roots of resentment and seen how it shapes the world around us, it's time to turn inward. The question we must ask ourselves now is this: how do we rise above resentment? How do we become strong, not just in body, but in spirit and mind and soul? Nietzsche's answer is both demanding and liberating. He does not offer comfort, he offers challenge, and his call is clear: become who you are. But what does that mean? It begins with a confrontation with yourself. To become strong, you must first face the truth of your life. You must ask yourself without flinching, where am I hiding? Where am I playing small? Where have I allowed fear to make my choices? This requires honesty, deep honesty, not the kind you use to look good to others, but the kind that might hurt at first. Because it pulls away all the lies you've told yourself to stay safe. Strength begins there, not in pretending to be perfect, but in admitting where you are weak and choosing to grow anyway. Choosing to take responsibility for your inner world, your thoughts, your reactions, your judgments, your pain. Nietzsche believed that the greatest souls are not those who avoid suffering, but those who transform it. And here is where his idea of the Übermensch becomes important. The Overman. Not someone who dominates others, but someone who has overcome himself. Someone who has mastered his instincts. Someone who no longer needs society to tell him who he is, because he has carved his identity from the stone of his own struggle. To Nietzsche, this is power, and it is a quiet, patient, unshakable power. How do you become that kind of person? You begin by setting your eyes not on what is popular, but on what is true. You stop chasing approval, you stop chasing comfort, you stop blaming the world for your problems, and you ask, what can I build with my life that is beautiful and honest and mine? This path is not easy. You will feel alone at times because many people are still stuck in resentment, still pointing fingers, still pulling others down. But that's why your strength matters, because it can be a light, not the light that forces others to follow, but the light that shows what is possible. Nietzsche believed that every person has a potential self, a higher self hidden beneath layers of fear, guilt, habit, and social conditioning. And the task of life is not to impress others, but to uncover that deeper self. That self that can think clearly, speak bravely, love deeply, create freely. But here's the secret, that self does not emerge by accident. It must be forged. And the forge is your suffering. Every time you are misunderstood, use it to sharpen your clarity. Every time you are rejected, use it to deepen your self-love. Every time you are criticized, use it to test your truth. And every time you feel envy, use it to reveal what you secretly admire. Then build it within yourself. This is what it means to become strong. Not to dominate, but to develop. Not to crush, but to cultivate. Not to prove, but to embody. And when you do, you will no longer be trapped by resentment. You will no longer feel the need to compare yourself to others. Because you will be rooted. You will be anchored in a purpose that is real, in a truth that is yours. And those who are still lost in bitterness will no longer intimidate or offend you. You will see their attacks for what they are, not threats but cries for help. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That why, your purpose, comes from choosing to live from your highest values. Not the values of the herd, not the values of fear, but the values of the soul, courage, integrity, creativity, responsibility. This is how you outgrow weakness, not by pretending it doesn't exist, but by walking through it, slowly, patiently, bravely, until it becomes strength. And once you reach that place, you will find something surprising. You will find that true strength is not cold. It is not cruel. It is not harsh. It is tender, compassionate, wise, because only those who have faced their own darkness can truly love others. Only those who have carried the weight of resentment and set it down can help others rise. And that, Nietzsche would say, is the purpose of becoming strong. Not to lift yourself above others, but to lift others by your example. Not through control, but through clarity. Not through force, but through freedom. So if you find yourself resenting the strong, pause. Ask yourself, what is this feeling showing me about who I want to become? And if you are afraid of being strong, afraid of what others will say, remember this: their opinions are not your prison. Your fear is not your fate. You are not made to shrink, you are made to rise. This journey will take time. It will require solitude. It will ask you to walk away from people who need you to stay small. It will ask you to build new habits, new thoughts, a new relationship with yourself. But if you keep going, something incredible will happen. You will stop needing to impress anyone. You will stop needing to defend yourself. You will stop needing to apologize for your fire. And instead, you will live fully, freely, fiercely. That is what Nietzsche believed was possible for each of us. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain becomes purpose, where weakness becomes wisdom, where resentment is replaced by responsibility, and where you quietly and steadily become someone the world cannot ignore. Not because you demand attention, but because you have become real. This is the power that the weak do not understand. It is the power to walk your own path, to speak your own truth, to live with depth and vision and courage, and it is waiting for you, not someday, but now. So go, begin, become, because the world does not need more people pretending to be strong. It needs people who are strong because they have faced themselves and chosen to rise. And that, more than anything, is why the weak hate the strong. Because the strong remind them of what they could be if only they dared. And now you know you can.